And we appear to be live. Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Apptrepreneur, and welcome to a, impromptu live stream of the Apptrepreneur Show. I am your host, Kevin the Apptrepreneur. And forgive the crude setup, I am doing this in another office, on location, can't have the setup the way I want to do, but I still wanted to do some videos like this throughout the week, and even though this one's late, I figured, if you don't catch it live, you can catch it the next morning. So, I saw this very interesting article about Airbnb. Now, Airbnb is a company that I definitely have some mixed feelings about. To be absolutely clear, I do have stock in Airbnb. I think Airbnb has the potential to be a very, very big company. Of course, one of the problems with Airbnb is I don't necessarily like what the company is inspiring. I like the idea that Airbnb can be used as a platform for grandma to rent out an extra room that she is not using at the moment, or for you to rent out the back shed as like a little bit of a little mini apartment or something like that. I'm perfectly okay with Airbnb being used for things like that. What I am not okay with is where big companies are getting involved in Airbnb and basically using Airbnb as a way to circumvent regulations. What I mean is there's a reason that you have to have special licenses and stuff for a company or a corporation to rent out an apartment and to manage an apartment and to manage a hotel. And what Airbnb has managed to do is they have found a way to circumvent that whole thing. We're like, hey, if you rent out the rooms through Airbnb, you are in a sense by getting around some of the regulations that you would normally have to abide by to rent out that apartment or hotel. In fact, there's a story like when I went to the Czech Republic several years ago, we stayed at an Airbnb and we went into this building in an apartment, and it was a really nice, fully furnished apartment, and I thought it was kind of neat, kind of weird that it also shared the Scientology church in the same building. I thought that was very interesting. But there were people across the street protesting, and of course I didn't know what they were protesting, but thankfully a lot of people in the Czech Republic do speak English. And apparently, not too long ago, that very building that I was staying in to make my little trip to the Czech Republic used to be an apartment complex. But the landlord saw dollar bill signs in his eyes and basically evicted everyone to just Airbnb the whole building, and people were kicked out of their home for Airbnb. That was something that I did not necessarily like, and as a result, I do not use Airbnb when I travel anymore. And apparently, this is becoming like a big issue, and according to at least one TikToker who has crunched the numbers and everything, welcome Repair Your PC, he thinks that this sort of action and this sort of behavior might actually ruin Airbnb as we know it. So this comes to us from the Daily Dot, and again, it's an on-location thing. I wish I could show you the article. It's terrible that you have to listen to me read it out loud, but them's the break. And the headline is, "The hosts are going to destroy everything Airbnb was created to be. Researcher says hosts are destroying Airbnb." This is by Melody Held. Now that's a little redundant of a headline. I think one would have been fine, but whatever. So here's what it says. A popular TikToker went viral for claiming to be a researcher who spent months, quote, digging into Airbnb. He says he came to the conclusion that, quote, the hosts are going to destroy everything Airbnb was created to be. In the video, Mr. Chris Chill at Mr. Chris Chill responds to another TikToker who claims in a viral video the era of Airbnb is done. Chris says the platform was intended to be used by people who had some extra space and wanted to make some side money. Chris says instead, some hosts are quote-unquote big developers who buy entire apartment complexes and then turn those units into Airbnbs that operate like hotels. Quote, instead of grandma renting out her son's old room, it's a big developer buying an entire apartment complex and turning 80% of those into Airbnbs, Chris says. And yeah, we touched on that a little bit, but here's why he thinks it's a bad thing. He claims that, in turn, there are too many hosts on the platform and that the company doesn't know how to manage the influx of hosts, leading to poor quality and service. Quote, The hosts ruin it for everyone, he concludes. Airbnb has a lot of potential, but unfortunately it's being ruined, and their leadership doesn't know how to handle it. Chris clarifies at the end of his video his team was made up of graduate-level business students. The video was viewed 505,000 times. In the comment section, viewers listed their own reasons for why they are anti-Airbnb. One of them, the prices used to be very affordable. Now they're outrageous, one viewer said. Let's tackle that one, because if there are hosts that are buying full buildings of apartment complexes or houses and stuff just to Airbnb them, then yeah, there's going to be an affordability problem, because there's a lot of costs and expenses that go along with those, especially if they are buying an apartment complex. With the apartment complex, there are special maintenance fees that you have to pay. There are guideline fees you have to pay. There are specific ways in which you manage the buildings, or else that building can be taken from you. Of course, those costs are going to reflect in the cost of the Airbnb yourself. Now, someone buys a house for Airbnb. Well, here's the thing. They're not just renting a room anymore. Now they are renting an entire complex. Well, not complex, an entire, two-story house. And you have to factor in that that house is probably not going to be in demand all year round, unless you're, in Anaheim or Orlando and you're near a theme park. And you're going to have to pay the mortgage and the homeowners association fees and all that stuff all year round. So you've got to price it factoring in for the slow period. You have to price it factoring in the extra costs of running a house. You have to make sure the mortgage is at least paid for. You never know exactly how much in utilities they're going to use, so you've got to overcharge on that one and assume that they're going to use electricity like your life depends on it. So that's one thing. And the next issue, which kind of adds to the cost, don't forget the outrageous $200 cleaning fees and hosts still expecting you to do chores before you leave, another complaint. Now, here's the thing. This whole thing about chores and the cleaning fees, I'm kind of two minds on this one, but it does show that people expect something different with Airbnb. Now, kind of like how when Uber started and people were expecting things from drivers that they really had no business at all expecting, considering what they were paying compared to the taxis, Airbnb is very similar the same way. People want to pay low prices for Airbnb. They're using Airbnb primarily because they don't like paying for hotels. They want to pay a lot less money. However, here's the problem. They also want to act like it's a hotel. So they're going to rent a house and they're going to leave things around. They're not going to clean up after themselves. They will expect you as the host to clean it up. Well, people who are renting this full time, they have to usually pay to have those places cleaned because they have to hire cleaning ladies and staff to maintain them. So they have started putting chores. And what a chore is with an Airbnb host is when you get there, there is a list of things you must do before you leave. So they say, hey, before you leave, all the dishes must be washed. The beds must be made. The place must be vacuumed if there is dirt on it. And if you do not do these things, you will be charged a cleaning fee. And I see right here, Lisa said that she's never been asked to do a chore. You will be asked to do a chore at one point because it's kind of becoming something that you almost can't avoid doing. Now, it's good if you clean the bathrooms yourself. I'm sure they very much appreciate that. But this is becoming such an issue because, in a sense that now when people know that there are no chores, they typically don't do them. And when they don't do them, that costs the hosts money and time and money they'd probably rather not spend. So they start now adding chores of their own. In fact, there was one post fairly recently that made big deals where they left a whole list of chores that had to be done. Basically, you had to leave the house the same way that it was when you entered. And if you didn't, they would charge you $2,000 as a cleaning fee. Now, these people agreed to these terms before they stayed at the Airbnb, and thus they had agreed to pay that fee if they did not clean up, but they didn't really read the whole thing. They just saw, hey, great price and all that jazz, and they signed up. And then before they realized that they were on the hook to clean the entire house or pay a $2,000 cleaning fee. Now, there's another reason that they're doing this. It's because of parties. Airbnb did make news recently, and I wanted to make a video about this, but I didn't get around to it. But Airbnb put a temporary ban during COVID on parties in the Airbnb that said, hey, you know what? When you are renting an Airbnb house, you are not to have people over. You are not to have a party. You're not to do anything. It is for you and a couple people. Well, Airbnb decided to make that permanent because the problem with Airbnb is you used to have the option where you could reserve like a house or something, and you could say, I'm going to have this many people and there's going to be a party. But of course, they charge you extra when you're going to do that. And for those of you who are Uber drivers, you may understand why Uber Pool is such a headache. Because even though people might need an Uber X, they want to save money. So they're going to ask for the Uber Pool, and they're going to try to fill that car up. Same thing with the Airbnb. They want to have a party at someone else's house, but they don't want to pay the money. So they're going to rent the Airbnb. They're going to say there's only a couple people, and then they're going to cause a commotion for the neighborhood. Not to mention, they absolutely will not do the chores, and they will seek out houses, by the way, that don't require you to do chores or have a cleaning fee, and they will mess up that house. So Airbnb has decided to make party banning, I should say, permanent. And if you get caught doing it, you can lose access to the Airbnb platform. So, here's what Airbnb previously spoke about cleaning fees. While hosts maintain the ability to choose their own cleaning fees, we do offer tips to hosts on keeping the amount reasonable and suggest they consider not charging cleaning fees at all, a spokesperson said at the time. Well, and of course Airbnb is going to suggest you don't charge the cleaning fees at all. I am of the opinion that that is not sustainable. I believe that every Airbnb host should charge a cleaning fee, whether you're going to use it or not. Because you are inevitably going to get someone who is not going to clean the house. Inevitably, you will even get someone who might outright trash it. They might leave the dishes out, not wash them, the ants might get in, they might not make the bed, and then you got to pay for that. And especially unless you're charging like $500 a night, it's going to lose you money to do those sorts of things. Have you ever noticed why the fanciest hotels in the world charge $300 to $500 a night, sometimes more? It's because they make sure that those places are immaculate and they spend the money. And Airbnb is kind of in an interesting position. Like the Uber rider who wants a limousine quality ride for $3 a trip, so too does the Airbnb visitor want a fancy, luxurious Trump Tower. And here's the thing: Trump Towers. If you've ever been to like a Trump property hotel, they are very, very nice. They charge thousands of dollars to stay, but they want that experience for $50 a night, and they don't want to pay any extra fees to get it. And that is not a sustainable thing. And then the question comes, well, okay, once you start tacking on like cleaning fees and you start having people do chores, at some point it might actually start becoming less enticing than a hotel. Because if you're going to have to clean up after yourself or else pay a cleaning fee, heck, you might as well pay a little extra and stay at a hotel at that point, right? And just assume that they're going to clean up after you. Let's continue this. Okay, actually, that's the end of the article. So I kind of agree with this TikToker. And when I get a chance, I will link to the TikToker's video below. Again, I can't share it due to the nature of this particular setup right now. But I think this is something that Airbnb should very much be worried about. Like, not only is it going to lead to them being regulated, which I think, even as an investor, I believe Airbnb should be regulated. I think if you set up some very clear guidelines, Airbnb can still grow as a business and people can still make money. I believe that, yes, when you're using Airbnb, you can rent out a room or something. I do not believe that if you're using Airbnb, you can rent out whole apartments. I think that leads to some, let's just say, unfair competition where people with money start buying up towns. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have seen It's a Wonderful Life. You know how Mr. Potter was buying all those buildings and basically wanted to own the town? And if George Bailey had not been around to thwart those plans, it would have been Pottersville and he would have owned that town. I think we watched that movie and we acknowledged that that's not exactly a good thing to happen. And yet, Airbnb has made that a very real possibility that these towns are now going away because they have their own Mr. Potters who want to rent out on Airbnb. I think regulation needs to come that, hey, you know what? You're just renting out a room and it's going to be temporary. And I think there's a lot of room for business there. And yes, if they want to charge a cleaning fee for people who mess up those rooms, they are allowed to do that. But if you wonder why your Airbnb is getting more expensive and it's all of a sudden tackling on chores and cleaning fees, it's because people are frankly abusing it. And we all know that people who are the cheapest, they tend to care the least. And so, yeah, next time you take your Airbnb and you see that chore list, just know that chances are someone came before you that messed up the toilet or they messed up the kitchen or something like that. And now you've got to clean up after yourself or you got to pay a cleaning fee. Or maybe you're just going to cut out the middleman. And it's like, you know what? Screw this. My Airbnb is charging me $100 a night and I have to actually do chores while on vacation before I leave. Tell you what, I'll pay the Hyatt $120 a month and we'll forget the chores. And I'll just enjoy my entire stay. So this tech talker is not wrong when he says that these sorts of hosts may actually ruin the Airbnb experience. By that same token, what can they do? People are taking advantage of them, and they're not following the rules, and they're messing up the houses, and so at some point, something's got to give. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to Airbnb going forward from this point on. So anyway, that is going to be this episode of the Apptrepreneur Show. Like I said, it was going to be brief. We might do another one, let's say Saturday or Sunday night. I haven't quite decided, and it might be a little bit longer, a little bit more interactive. But in the meantime, I'd like to know what you think about this topic. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one. Let me reach over, and it's over here, so we can end this.